Papa Geoff's America program is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Thank you. If you'd like to buy Papa Geoff a cup of coffee, visit us on the web at coffee.papageoffusa.com, because you know how much Papa Geoff loves his coffee. Papa Geoff's America, the talk radio podcast, continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. It's talk radio time from Houston, Texas, broadcasting around the country and around the world. Welcome to the Papa Geoff's America program. We're the talk radio podcast that discusses the stuff and things that you want to talk about. The talk radio podcast continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. Inspiring guests, insightful commentary, and what would a day be without Papa Geoff's classic old guy humor, right? So, here's the guy that has trouble seeing the big E on the eye chart. The guy that some would say has a unique sense of humor, and the guy that definitely has a face for radio. Here's Mr. Here We Go himself, PG the OG, Papa Geoff. Welcome to Papa Geoff's America. The Talk Radio Podcast, continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. I'm Papa Geoff, and this is Papa Geoff's America. Today, Tom O'Driscoll from Hersham, England, is with us for another in our From Across the Pond series. Tom's a very accomplished musician and songwriter, and we're going to talk with him about his album Tenacity and how the title track got its name. Tom's very talented, very driven, and very dedicated, and I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Tom O'Driscoll in just a little bit. The Papa Geoff's America program, we are the talk radio podcast, continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. Here's today's fun coffee fact according to Aggie Boo. Coffee came to the rescue for some Brazilian Olympic athletes. Now, I use coffee to rescue me every day, but apparently Brazil could not afford to send its water polo team to Los Angeles for the 1932 Olympics. So here's what they did. The government sent the athletes on a ship full of coffee beans, and whenever the ship made port, the beans were sold, thus financing their trip. Pretty smart, huh? Did you know that coffee is actually a fruit? Coffee beans grow on a bush and are actually the pit of a berry, which is the characteristic that makes them a fruit. Coffee beans come in two main varieties, green and red. Red beans have a nicer smell and are less acidic than the green and are used to produce lighter tasting coffees. But what about decaf, you say? Decaffeinated coffee comes from a chemical process where the caffeine is taken out of the beans. The caffeine is then often sold to major beverage manufacturers like Coca-Cola and others. And there you go. Today's fun coffee fact. It's a sunny 87 degrees at the Talk OG studios in H-Town, Space City, Houston, Texas. We are the city with no limits. We are Houston strong. Coming up, Tom O'Driscoll and Tenacity. Next. The Papa Geoff's America program is on the air. Anytime, any device. PapaGeoffUSA.com.
Forcing, intervening, go-betweening, none of it's good. About impatience with complacent sponsors set from hearts of wood. Nothing left but whatever is me, and nothing left to cling to. Too many underlying hostilities gave way to underlying abilities. Prevailing atmosphere is cold and insincere. There's nothing for me here, I want to disappear. Auto-sector reality check, things are feeling insular evidently. They're going slow and the flowers that grow will only reach with difficulty. Obturate is a dispensation, taking flight is a manifestation. On I go whenever everyone's way till I find myself against where I'll stay. A major peak in anyone's speak, only hope it's over real soon. I stay uptight, not great, not right. Under cloud when you're stubborn and proud and you're trying to find a way through. The seas are fraying, feel it running loose. At times the squeeze just isn't worth the juice. A dime a dozen is a waste of time, but it's headstrong patience keeping me alive. Empathy has a relevancy, with 1,000 other things on my mind. Do I wonder how would I measure up now in the lives of everyone left behind? Some succumb while some last longer. What to break me makes me stronger. Held myself together, never do well. If I make a break, only time will tell. But then again, will it matter to me that it won't is probably true.
Welcome back, everybody. Our guest today is Mr. Tom O'Driscoll from Hersham in England. It's Surrey County in the United Kingdom. He is here today. Tom, I am honored, sir. Welcome to the program, and thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jeff.
Now, Hersham in Surrey is just southwest of London. Have you always been there? Is that where you grew up? Is that where you have primarily been based there in Hersham?
Well, mostly. I mean, I've always lived in Surrey anyway. I mean, Hersham, for the most part of my life. There's a couple of other towns I've lived at as well, but it's nearly always been Hersham.
I think that's great. I've made several different moves in my life, starting in Los Angeles and then going to Reno, Nevada, and then ended up here in Houston. And Houston is so huge. Literally, the locals joke that Houston is an hour away from Houston because it just takes forever to get anywhere. And so I can definitely appreciate that. Now, I know that music has been a big influence on your life since an early age. When did you get started in music? When did you get interested, and when did you get going there?
Well, as far back as I can remember, I always liked music. I mean, my learning days began when I was about 12. I had guitar lessons, which I did for approximately 2 years. And by then, I'd sort of become good enough to jam with the other guys who I was at school with. There was a couple of bands came and went. Played guitar. I switched to bass when I was about 19. Initially just playing root notes, as you do when you take up the bass, but then I wanted to take it further out, and do something. To play the bass very well is very different from playing the guitar, really. And I've kind of worked on both down the years. So now I do both in equal measures, which is probably the reason why when I made my album, I decided to play both parts myself.
I think that's awesome. There aren't a lot of guys that do that, is there?
It's known. I mean, well, what some bands do is the songwriter records the parts himself and then lets the rest of the band learn from what he's done, which saves, explaining stuff, or it explains someone trying to get someone to play note for note. If they hear it, it's probably a better way of learning. I'm not actually a band member as such, but if I was to do a live performance of my album, that's how it would work. People just learning from what I've done. Best way, really.
I like it. I think that's great. I love a solid bass track. It's not and drums as well. I don't dislike the other instruments certainly, but a strong bass track I love because
That's the foundation. Yeah.
I'm a toe tapper and a pen tapper on the radio or on the desk, and like that. That's me. Now, singer, songwriter, guitarist, bassist, author, and composer. Dude, you are what I would call one-stop shopping. You do it all.
Well, kind of. I took up a writing course years ago. I did one completed story. I've got about 3 others I haven't actually got around to finishing yet. But what I'm doing is I'm writing songs for a follow-up album just to pass the time in lockdown. And any time left over than that, I'm going to resume my writing course and get the stories completed as well. It'll be good to come out of the lockdown with a lot of creative stuff to show, I think.
That's absolutely great. And I can't wait to hear it because I've heard the album that you have out now, and it wasn't originally written for COVID times. In fact, it came out a number of years before.
That's right,
it's definitely pertains. You had sent me a message that said, and I quote, "This is a song I wrote a while ago. Despite this, it does seem quite apt for these turbulent and changing times." Well, amen, brother. It definitely does. And that song is Tenacity. And I love it. And I know that it will be in our podcast broadcast here someplace. I haven't heard from the production folks if it's going to be before, after, during, but it is definitely going to be in the podcast show somewhere. And it's great. I see. I'm going to ask you in a minute, what tenacity was all about, but the term tenacity, as I looked it up, says the quality or fact of continuing to exist. It has to do with persistence. And you released that album, Tenacity. It has a bunch of other songs on it in 2014. But what is Tenacity all about?
What you mean, the album as a whole? You mean, or that?
Sure. Let's start with that.
It's really just a collection of songs I wrote down the years. I mean, I played in bands as a bass player, but I was more of a learner in those days than a writer, except for occasionally I'd come up with a song. And my band days pretty much finished when I was about 30. I was doing the local rounds in a duo, and that called for doing cover versions, really, rather than getting a chance to play my own music. And it was only when I had enough songs to make an album and I had a bit of a gap in my diary that I started to take the trip to the studio to start laying down the tracks. And that began in 2012, and it was pretty much whenever the studio was available, and it just sort of happened as and when it did. But it was 10 tracks. So it's kind of like a pun. It's tenacity, which is why track 10 is Tenacity.
I love it. That is really unique. That is really smart. That's great. See, there's always a story. There's always a backstory behind things like that. And I love to get to that and share that with folks that, and I've heard some of your cover work as well. And it is great. You definitely have the skills, my friend. They are definitely there. Definitely there. And you were saying that, as you were performing and you were younger and you were kind of learning as you go. That's kind of like people that do podcasts. We kind of learn as we go here, and we learn something that we really like, and then we do that again, and then we do something that we say, I don't like that, so we don't do that again. But it's definitely a learning experience.
That's how we develop. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now that album has a lot of other, I'm going to call it brilliant because I think it is, work on it as well. And I like to say, and I know others have said that your sound is very much like the Beatles. And I hadn't seen it before in the reviews that I've read, but I like to say that several of the songs that I listen to have the song like The Who put out. And I know that your music is your music. I can tell that too, that you're not trying to, I'm trying to be this and I'm trying to be that. No, you're trying to be you, and you are being you. And I can definitely hear that in the music. One of your songs is called The Other Side of Life, and I love that because it's got heavy bass, and it's got, I don't know if it's just how it was laid down, the track was laid down, or how it was mic'd, but the kick drum is very strong as well. And when just my own personal preference, when the bass competes with the kick drum, I'm in heaven. I love it. I will crank that up for sure. And so you've got, but there's also Remember Days, Hold Me Down, Apathy, Above the Below. That's very unique. But tell us about the Tenacity, the number 10 track on that. Tell us what Tenacity itself is about, because it was put down it was released in 2014, but those lyrics pertain to today.
It was just written in a rather difficult time years ago, and it wasn't even written in one go. Actually, it was kind of piecemeal, meaning it was like a few ideas here, and and then what I did was I had loads of scraps of paper with Tenacity written on them. I just went through them all, deciding which ones to keep and which ones to chuck away. And just eventually I got enough that fitted the song and had, if not a perfect rhyme, but they were, they matched each other. I ran through it a few times, and it was as simple as that, really. But it was something I didn't sit down and write it in 10 I didn't sit down and write it just one day or something, or in 5 or 10 minutes. It was something that I came back to. When I finally did come back to, I was able to find it. Yeah.
You just knew. You were able to put all the notes together, all the different thoughts, do some sorting. Yes, I want this. No, I don't want that. And that's how Tenacity was born. That's
how I still write now, really. It's just ideas. It's often song in A or song in B or whatever, if there's no title. And then when I've got enough stuff, I think, well, there must be a song in there somewhere, and that's when I sift through them. But that was how Tenacity was written, which is funny, really, because although it's the title track, it was the last song written, and of course that means it was the last song that was actually recorded too, even though it's meant to be the main song on the album.
I think that makes it unique, though. That makes it unique to the album, and I think it's very interesting that the lyrics can pertain to what's been going on with COVID-19 around the world because of lockdowns and people not being able to work and varying things. We've all had our own things that are going on, and guys, when you listen to the lyrics of this song, just think about what you've been going through during COVID times, and they pertain. It's I know sometimes lyrics in songs can pertain to different things. I get that, but this is, I think, Tom, definitely you had something going on there. I'm not saying you saw something, but it's very almost eerie that what that song talks about is we actually went through and are still going through it. I like to think we're coming out the other side, especially here in the States. We have new leadership in our government that's trying to do things and are doing things that our previous leadership did not do. I don't want to turn it into a political thing, but we're coming out. We're coming out the other side, and unfortunately, here there's a lot of people that have lost their lives and families have changed, and it's terrible. But
it is, yeah.
They're going to get it under control, and we're all going to get back on track. And Tenacity, it's amazing. You did some great work there. I have another question for you on one of your songs, and I didn't brief you on this one, but I'm going to just kind of throw it out to you because I think it's another interesting song, and I'm thinking there's probably something behind it. The song's name is Kenny Ken and His Picture of Ben. What's the story behind that?
It's actually a made-up character, but it's based on an article that I read to do with miscarriages of justice, of which there has been several in the UK since the late 80s. There's been quite a lot of highly publicised cases of people spending years in jail for crimes they haven't committed. And this story was written about someone who not only was he innocent, but they discovered the crime hadn't been committed in the first place. So it was a step beyond people who have been wrongfully imprisoned. Somebody was accused of something and it hadn't even happened. The name's made up, but the lyrics are based on the thing that I read. Again, it was something that I wrote, I shelved it and I came back to it. But that's quite a popular one with people, you know. People have often asked me, is he a real person? And often they're more disappointed than they are pleased to hear that he isn't. It's almost like they'd like to go and meet him, you know.
Yeah. It happened. It didn't happen to that particular person because that particular person is fictional, but it's still sad and unacceptable that it did happen to somebody. And that we have those situations here as well. People are being released from prison, certainly with the newer things that are coming up with DNA evidence and things. And it's terrible. I cannot even imagine spending any time incarcerated for something that I knew I didn't do, but somehow the system and all of the stuff around it worked against me. That's another deep song, Tom. It's guys, you need to check out the whole Tenacity album for sure, and we're going to have that in our show links so they can click and go right to that and check that out. But that's interesting that's a real thing with a fictional person. And you said you've played in different gigs in the UK and played in different bands and stuff, but for now it's pretty much been you and then recording with other artists and such. What's on the horizon? What's your plan once we get out of this, once we're at least at the point where we're safe to be around other people? What's next for Mr. Tom O'Driscoll?
To do a second album. I mean, I've been working very hard to try and reinvent my style and try and come up with something different. I mean, rather than to do the same trick twice, I set myself the goal of doing something different, hopefully better, but at the same time, it has to sound like me. When you put those three things together, that's quite a tall order. Mm-hmm. But having had a lot of time on my hands since the start of the year, I'm finally getting close to what I've been trying to do. I mean, it's hard to actually describe it without people hearing it, but it's something that people will hear and they'll recognize it as the same person who did the first album, even though it's different. And hopefully it could be musically better. I'm going to add a few more instruments. I've got a friend who's a very good harmonica player. He's going to play on at least 2 tracks, possibly 3. I've got a friend who sings in 2 choirs. She's going to come in hopefully and do backing vocals. And another friend gave me some lyrics, and I've written some tunes to that. So although it's a solo album, there'll be a few more people helping out this time, which is really why I have to wait till it's over, because if it was just me on my own, it wouldn't be so hard. But if it's people around you, there's enough room to move around, but social distancing could be tricky,
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I can't wait for it to come out, and I know our audience can't wait for it to come out. So COVID, you need to go away so that Tom and our other artists, especially those that are friends of our broadcast, can get things going again. We definitely need to do that. Tom, I know our audience is going to love hearing Tenacity and your other songs that are there on the YouTube and such. And as for our listeners keeping up with you and following you, they can do that on Facebook and YouTube. Yeah?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put all of those links to your music and to your Facebook, to your YouTube, and folks can contact you. We're going to put those links in our show notes, and you're going to get some folks contacting you, man, because that's
fantastic. Thank you. Cheers.
This is good stuff. And my best wishes to you, sir. Cheers. That it's going to happen. It's happened before. Well, it's going to happen again, and I can't wait to see that happen. And we're going to do our part. We're going to put this broadcast out. Our folks are going to hear it. I like to say that I know people that know people, because I do, and those people know people. So we'll see where this goes. And Tom, thank you so much for taking the time, for coming on the show. We hope you'll come back and keep us posted about what's going on.
It's been a pleasure to be here, and I would very much like to come back sometime, Jeff. Yeah,
Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. Cheers, mate.
anytime is good with me.
Awesome. Very much appreciated. This is the Papa Geoff's America program. We are the talk radio podcast, continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. Thanks for joining us today for the Papa Geoff's America program. Check out more episodes of the Talk Radio podcast at papageoffusa.com. You can subscribe through the link on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on all the major platforms. papageoffusa.com is your home for everything Papa Geoff. Anytime, any device. And while you're there, you can check out more episodes of the broadcast, check out the OG Corner, get in contact with us, and you can easily link to all of our social media. We do want to hear from you. Your thoughts, comments, and suggestions are what make this program happen. So send us an email on our website, papageoffusa.com. Please help us to get the word out and share our broadcast on all of your social media, because sharing is caring. And speaking of caring, if you'd like to help us coffee up here at the Talk Radio Podcast, give a click to the Buy Me a Coffee link. You know how much Papa Geoff loves his coffee. Hey guys, remember to wear a mask if you're going out. Practice that social distancing. Wash your hands frequently. Get the vaccine when it's your turn. And let's all do the right thing and take care of each other. Remember, disagree doesn't mean dislike. We're all in this together. Thanks again for joining us, and bring a friend with you next time. We're looking forward to seeing you next time on the Talk Radio Podcast, continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time.